tell which one's the Father, which one's the Son? You got that sorted out all right? Yeah, really, really great to have you guys here today. And I'm guessing that most guys here have just driving around town or around the country. You have probably seen a Christian Brothers Automotive shop somewhere along the line. We probably won't put everybody on the spot and see who all uses Christian Brothers here today. We'll check that later. Yeah, well, there's somebody who does. Okay. Yeah, but there are a lot of them around town. But let's do this. Just if you don't know anything about them, Donnie, why don't we start with you, and just tell us about Christian Brothers. Tell us about the heartbeat, the growth, the awards. I mean, just tell us about anything you want to about Christian Brothers itself.
Sure, absolutely. So, Donnie Carr, pleasure to meet all of you. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak today. I hope I can bring some value. There's a decent chance I won't. I'm a big fan of low expectations. Christian Brothers Automotive, we are fortunate enough that we have over 250 locations in 30 states. We have also been blessed that we have won the J.D. Power Aftermarket Automotive Repair Best in Class for the last 3 years. And so it is something that we are very proud of. I will tell you that we are absolutely an automotive repair company. We do full service, anything from oil changes to engine replacement. But more importantly, I feel like we're a people-based company. And our goal, our desire is that no matter how long you spend a part of our brand, that you leave better off than you came. And that's whether it's for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 years, or 3 decades, we want to help you be the best version of yourself. And that's not just as a service manager or a technician or a franchisee. It's as a parent, it's as a spouse, it's as a community member. And so we believe very deeply in investing in our people. And so that's who we're trying to be as an organization.
Tell us a little bit about that for just a second. What does it mean to be investing in your people? What are the kind of things you do, and how do you guys flesh that out?
Yes. So there's been a couple of things. My dad was very generous when he retired, that he let us put an ESOP in place at our corporate office, and so that's a wonderful vehicle to help set these people up for success long term. We make it a point that at every training, every event that we have, we don't just talk about work. We talk about how do you do life. I'll tell you, in a week and a half from now, I'll be sitting down with the team members that have signed up, just talk about personal finances. How do you go about investing? Where do you put your dollars? How do you do it well? And so we offer financial peace. We have all of our stores have the opportunity to have chaplain care, where there's chaplains that come in couple of once a week to just spend time with them and their team members and to give that support, because a lot of things in life happen, and you need more than just dollars. You need that love and that support, that advice, all of those things.
Wow, that is excellent. I love that. So that's kind of the footprint of Christian Brothers as it is right now. 250 shops, yes. 30 states. It's a pretty significant footprint. But I'm guessing, Mark, it didn't just happen. So, one of the things, one of the things that I say a lot in settings like this is I love to hear, the way a man comes to do what he does and the things that shaped him to end up being who he is, in his life and in his career, because there's all these forces, all these experiences, there's defining moments along the way, and you get somewhere and you look back and you go, wow, there were a lot of different things that brought me to this place, right? So, Mark, I'd love you to give us the sort of the backstory, not just on Christian Brothers, but on Mark Carr, the guy who started off. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what that was like, how you ended up in Houston, car business, etc.
Okay, my name's Mark Carr. Don's a way better speaker than I am, so I'll just start with that. But
low expectations, that's good.
There you go.
Low expectations.
I like it. I lived in, I barely made it high school. I was a garbage collector for a while on the back of a truck. They called me a slinger. Don loves this. Business was always picking up, though.
And Donnie, you've never heard that before, have you?
Never,
yeah,
never.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did that for 6 or 7 months. I started working for Eastman Kodak in Rochester, and I hated it. It wasn't for me. And so I was looking at the Rochester Times, and it was about this big, and the Houston Chronicle, just the want ads were like this. And I didn't know anybody here. I didn't know what I was going to do. I have no idea. And I packed it all up in my '77 Corvette, and that was everything I owned. And I had a TV in the passenger seat, so that'll tell you I didn't have a lot going. So I came down and looking all over for a job, and it was just horrible. I mean, Taco Bueno wouldn't hire me with all these want ads. It was a very, very low point in my life. And my mom would call me every Sunday and said, how you doing? Want to make sure you're okay. And I says, Mom, I cut my hair, got braces on my teeth. I stopped sleeping around. I stopped doing drugs, and I've never been so miserable in my entire life. And she says, well, why don't you just do it God's way instead of your way? So I hung up the phone, and I'm not a Bible guy at that point in time or anything. I just dropped to my knees and said, Lord, my life's a mess. Just take it. Just take it. I'll live for you. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And about 2 days later, it's probably two or 3 days later, I got a job at working for a company that did photographic services. I would sell photo murals and things like that to trade shows. I really enjoyed it. I've got an artistic side of me, and it was a lot of fun for me to do. But after working for them for about probably 6 years or so, I was doing pretty well with it, but I just became an order taker, and I was just bored with it. And I literally went home one day and got on my knees on the side of the bed, and I says, Lord, you designed me different than this. Would you bring me a business opportunity? And the next day, my wife drags me to some function at church. Gosh, who knows what it was? And she said, I ran into a buddy of mine that was in my Bible study. And he was a mechanic for trade, and he says, I've always wanted to open my own business. Would you be my partner? I looked up and I went, this was just yesterday. What, are you kidding me? Well, I didn't have any money. Trust me, not a dime. And I borrowed some money from friends and family and prayed about it. And I bought a piece of land in A-Leaf, and I built the building and opened the business. And I figured, okay, if I buy the land and have the building, if it all goes downhill, at least I'll have that to, recoup some of my funds. And it did pretty well. It wasn't doing really well, but that's kind of how it started from there.
Yeah. So, and that's about the time that I got to know you. So, Mark and I, and we were in a group together back at that point in time, and he was running the one shop in A-Leaf, and so that was 30 plus years ago. Yeah. So, how do you? I mean, we've already heard a couple of real key defining moments already. Right, I've cut my hair, I got braces, I changed everything I could on the outside, and it didn't make a difference on the inside, and so that brought you to defining moment number one.
That's correct.
And then there's a sense that you were designed for something more than what you were doing in that moment, and that becomes defining moment number two, which leads you into a partnership that becomes the first shop. So let's hear a little bit about how you get from there to franchising, frankly.
Well, I learned a big lesson. My partner, he was a mechanic, but he wasn't a very good money manager, and I bought him out about 2 years into it. And so in 1989, I went over there and ran it. Actually, my father did it for me for a while, for about 7 years, and then he wanted to retire, so I went over there, and business increased. Well, I'll give you a short story. My brother and I used to go and visit my grandfather and grandmother in upstate New York. And it was the last time I saw him, and I says, Papa, I don't know what to do with myself, I lost my cars. I almost lost my house. I mean, the economy was terrible. And I says, I don't know what to do. If I go run this thing full time, this is my last straw. And Dad was right. I'm not going to amount to anything. Well, he said, look, God gave you that business. Just go run it. So in 1989, in December of 89, I went over there and ran it. and within 3 or 4 months, it increased like 30%. Well, I wasn't there long enough to make a difference. It was just God's verification I was supposed to be there. So it was going really well and starting to make a living and stuff. And my kids are in T-ball, and I'm going from one field to the other. Everything's good. And the Lord taps me on the shoulder. He says, "I want you to open another one." I looked up. I said, "Not on your life. That is not happening." And it was a wrestling match, trust me, for almost a year. And I finally gave up, and I had paid my land and building off, so I was able to use that as leverage to start my next business. And then back then, you can kind of get an appraisal for whatever you wanted to. So I started my second store in the Woodlands, and then I opened another one at Grant and Lowetta. And then my attorney comes to me and he says, "Well, Mark, you can't do this." And I says, "Well, what are you talking about?" He says, "You're breaking franchise law because you make them not be open on Saturdays, the parts, the name, the whole 9 yards." And I says, "I don't have any money." And he says, "Don't worry about it. We're going to turn you into a franchise and you can pay me later." Well, he's our general counsel right now. He's my first friend in Houston. And so that's really how that part got started. And got to 6 stores, and the banks weren't going to lend me any more money, and I don't blame them. And so we got involved with a venture capitalist, and I don't want, don't do that. Don't do that. So that's kind of how it got started. And then we brought some people in and expanded to about 21 stores, and just continued on from there. Yeah. But my shtick was just making the lobby nice. There was a customer came in that was from my church who had driven a long way to get his car fixed. We fixed his car and we took care of it and stuff, and he just looked at me and he says, "I just got to tell you though, this place is dirty and it smells, and I can't believe that you would do something like this." Well, I was so furious I couldn't even see straight. So I sat in my chair and I just thought to myself, okay, be a customer, go outside, take a look at it. And he was right. So did a beautiful lobby. I was out there with a shovel, putting landscaping in and stuff like that. And those were the things that really kind of got it going. Yeah. And just the basic tagline of "love your neighbors yourself" was it for me.
Now, is that the same time you made your list of 20 things?
Yeah. Well, yeah. After I got to my third store, I sat there and I made a list of all the reasons why people hated to get their cars fixed. And I just went down that list of 20 things, and I just started checking them off. And I says, I can solve all those problems. And most of it really generated around honesty. Car business isn't honest, it doesn't have a really great honest reputation, but I knew I could change that because Christ was in my heart, and he was going to lead me in that direction.
That's great. That is so good. So I'm guessing in that growth pattern that you guys were in, and that it wasn't all smooth sailing. There's probably some challenges. I know you've told me. I've learned a lot more from my...
I've learned this much from my successes and this much from my failures. If you're smart enough to remember the failures is the winner, not the good stuff.
Yeah.
Was your first store named Christian Brothers?
Yes, it was. Yeah. We were in a Bible study, and the guy that did it with me was in my Bible study, and we're going, "Well, what do we call this thing?" And he says, well, somebody come up and says, "Well, you're Christian Brothers, call it that." And I said, "Okay." Works for me.
Yeah, that's great. So I know that one of the, the moments that you told me about, Mark, is that I guess from the beginning, the heartbeat of the company was to benefit other people. And so you had a giving fund, like some part of what you guys did. And then at some point in time, you guys were cash strapped and you had a big crossroad experience. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah. We had to make payroll. And I think back then payroll was like, I don't know, $18,000 or something like that. And we got nothing going for us. And we didn't have the money in the bank to make payroll. And I says, how much do we have in our giving account? We give 10% of what we gross. Now we net across the board. And he says, we got 16 grand in there. And I says, and they're saying, well, we can wait, we can do this in January, we can do this, it's okay, we got to make payroll first and so on. So I went home and I just prayed about it, and I came back and I says, give it all away. Just give it away. And so we gave away everything in the giving account, and the next day, it wasn't like $50,000. It was like $180,000 in royalties came in, and the next day, and I just couldn't believe it. But what a witness to everyone in the office that, hey, Christ comes first. And when you make that commitment to tithe, you do what you're supposed to do, or at least in my heart anyway. And that's so important to me.
That's awesome. Well, let's hear a little bit something from Donnie. Okay, Donnie, you joined the company even though you grew up around Christian Brothers. So, did the first shop start before you were born?
2 years before I was born,
Okay,
yes, sir.
so it's been a part of your life throughout your life. But you didn't come on to start working with Christian Brothers until '06. So give us a little about your journey up to that point and how you came to be a part of it and what you were doing before and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got thrown into Christian Brothers. To be honest, I didn't ever have any intentions of working at Christian Brothers. It was a small business, especially at the home office at the time. There wasn't a lot of team members. I didn't know if that was going to be for me. And then through that process, I finished college early, is what I like to say, because they were done with me and I was done with them. So found out a little bit late. I had to go get a job. You couldn't enroll in other junior colleges, anything like that. And so went and worked at Quiznos and did that for a while. My dad said, hey, why don't you go be a service writer at one of our stores in the Dallas-Fort Worth market? And so I became a service writer at our Plano location. I was paid extremely well.
I want to add this, and it's good for my heart. The guy he worked for was the cheapest guy I ever seen, and he was the lowest paying person in the whole company.
After my 90-day raise, I was making $24,000 a year. And this is in 2005, so it's not like we're talking about the 70s. So I did that for almost a year, and then I decided, man, I love this, but I love ministry. I love camping ministry. I'd grown up working at camps, going to camp, and so I said, before I commit to this long term, I need to see if this is really for me. And so I took a year off, not off, and I went and worked full-time at a ministry, T-Bar M, which is a Christian camp in New Braunfels, Texas. Did that. I loved it, but I realized I missed the business side of things. And at that time, we had just lost a team member at the home office. My dad said, hey, why don't you come work here? You can take that role. So I joined. At the time, there was 46 locations, and we had 12 team members at the home office. And so today we have over 150 team members at our home office. So I've gotten to be a part of that growth. I started as a trainer. I would go and spend a week or two in a store as it opened, helping those get open, and really just did anything and everything. I handled customer complaints for 8 years, it was a great regular reminder that we had a lot of things we could do better when you would handle those calls. So I did that in 2013. I had my first opportunity to interview for a managerial role at the home office. We were creating a coaching program for our stores. It was the director of store performance. And so I sat down and interviewed with our CEO, our COO, and our vice president of operations at the time. I like to tell this story because it makes me proud that there was 2 of them that voted yes for me and 1 that voted no. But they got together, had a conversation, and I was given the opportunity to do that. So did that in 2013, and I think 2016 I had the opportunity to become our vice president of operations. And then in 2018, he was kind enough, he was CEO and president for a very long time. He was kind enough to give me the presidential role in 2018, and then last year in July when he retired, I had the opportunity to become our president and CEO.
Wow, that's great. We're going to talk about that transition in just a minute. But you guys touched on a couple of things that I think is kind of the heartbeat of a lot of what you talked about, and that is the customer service side of what you do. Mark, you've told this story to me a bunch of times, but about someone comes in for a major repair, but they have a little squeak in the door, and you fix that, and that's what people really remember. Kind of go into that for just a second, would you? I think it's kind of great lessons in that.
There's a couple of stories, but one really, really sticks out in my mind. This lady came in, and she had a Suburban, and we did like $1,500 worth of work to her car, and back then, that was a lot. And in the back of the car, they have when you open the door, the light comes on. Well, the little plastic lens was missing. And I know that how annoying that would be looking in the rearview mirror. So I went down to the Chevy dealership and I bought one, and it was like 15 cents or something like that. I snapped it in for her, and I didn't tell her about it. She just pulled the car up. And she came back, she says, "You fixed my light. You fixed my light. Why would you do that? That's so awesome." You never talked about how much the ticket was, but she was thrilled with that light that I fixed. And, just things like that, like the older cars, you go and you grab the door handle. And I just said, well, adjust it for them, don't charge them or anything, just adjust it. So little things like that mean everything to people. They just do. And if you're really thinking about them instead of yourself, that seemed to be the success that we had, because love your neighbor as yourself. I stand on that, and I stand on it very firmly. I am not a perfect person in any way, shape, or form, but that is the main thrust of me getting up in the morning, on how I can love my neighbor as myself to change that person's life. And because I never had an opportunity, like I say, barely made it out of high school, the whole 9 yards, one of my biggest drives was to be able to give someone an opportunity that really isn't going to get one. I thought to myself at one point in time, I said, geez, if I could just get a fake college diploma, I know in my head and in my heart I could run anything out there. But I says, I really can't do that because it's wrong. So, but having that and going up against wall after wall after wall of no one ever wanting to hire you or anything, and I thought, okay, now I have something that I really can teach other people to do. And the success, when I was the president, the success was very, very, very good. Since Don's taken over, it has gone from very good to over the top on what these folks are making, and it just gives me this big smile on my face to see that people can come in, and no matter what kind of background they have or anything else. We get how many a month do we get applications?
We get 1,500 a year, so 1,100.
And out of that 1,500 a year, what we pick, like 60, 50?
1.5% of people that apply for a franchise get approved.
Yeah, it's hard to get one, because we want the right people. We want people that believe in our love your neighbor as yourself, and good Christian men and women. And the women knock it out of the park, by the way.
That's great. Okay, so I love that story about the light and that whole thing, because it's just one of those things where you go, little things make a big difference. To me, in the realm of, okay, traction, that's one of my takeaways. Okay, little things make a big difference, especially in communicating value to a person. So that's awesome. All right, now I want to talk about leadership transition. So I just think this is so interesting. First of all, anybody who's gone through transition knows that transition's hard. Change is not usually easy, and handing off a leadership baton is complicated. So I think it's probably complicated when a baton goes from a founder to a successor. And I think it's probably complicated when a baton goes from a father to a son. And I'm guessing it's even more complicated when the founder is the father and the successor is the son. So I would just love to hear about how you guys went through it. Don, just start with that. And you guys have both told me it wasn't easy, and that's not exactly how you put it. But I would love to hear about the pathway on that. It's important.
It was tough. It was very difficult, and there were so many things that I did wrong through that process. So when he handed over in 2018, I had thoughts of, hey, let's get this sale going, let's move on, let's get this moving down the road. Let's let the next generation take over. And so for a very long time, I felt like that he owed it to me to sell me this company. And I very much tried to take it from him, which was wrong. And it really wasn't until I'm sad to say that it wasn't until 2020 sometime, summer of 2020, that I finally realized how wrong I was. Because I'm trying to take and grab this thing from him, and I think that I'm owed it because I'm his kid and it's my inheritance or whatever. I am just so disappointed in me for that. And so I had this attitude, I'm going to try and take this company from him. And I did not have good empathy for what he had invested in that business and what that meant to him as a person at the time, 36, 38 years that he had grown this. And I had been at the home office for 15 plus years, and I had been a part of that growth, right? And so I'm saying, well, I get some credit for this too. But it wasn't until I got to that place of I'm not going to take this, and I really sat back and just said, I'm just going to sit here with open arms, and if it comes, it comes, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that was eventually what got us to a place of him saying, hey, I think I'm ready, let's have some conversations, and move down the road from that. So there was just so many things I could have done.
Can I interrupt you on that? Because that is a huge moment. All right, when you say, because you're in a place where, and I imagine we got some guys in the room today who are feeling sort of constrained, or feeling sort of held back in life and like they're pulling against their circumstance. And you got to the place where you said, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't, which sounds very calm and sober here today. I'm guessing that's kind of a death to self kind of moment. I mean, anything to add on that? I mean, that's huge.
Well, I'm extra disappointed because this is the second time I feel like I got to this place. So when I was the vice president of operations, I really wanted to get to that next level because I had a lot of thoughts and ideas of what we should do as an organization. And I kept looking at what was next instead of enjoying where I was and doing the best job that I could at what I had been currently given. And then when I got president, for some reason I forgot that again. And realized that, no, I don't just want to be president, I want to be CEO and I want to own this. And at that time, to be fair, I had zero ownership in Christian Brothers Automotive, and we had plenty of team members that were shareholders. And so I think that added a little bit of frustration to me. But I still wasn't right in any of it. But I think in life in general, that contentment that Christ talks about, that living in that place that, hey, let's just do the best version of this with what I have been given. The parable of the talents, whether it's 2 or 10, let me do the best with it and not worry about what God has next for me or trying to take something from someone else.
Well, it just makes me think about, it comes up in a couple different places in the Bible, but it says that it's just a dynamic. It says God's opposed to the proud but gives grace to the humble. And just kind of when you went low, it's a little bit like, your heart begins to open up and eventually the opportunities begin to open up.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then there's the bonus fun of negotiating a purchase price with a founder that is your father and has opinions on what this business is worth versus what the P&L say. And so that's just...
There's some sentimental value in there, I believe, isn't there?
100%. And so not only are you negotiating with the CEO, but you're also negotiating with your dad who's coming over to spend time with your kids. Like it's just on all levels. Like Christmas morning, it's like, oh, hey, this is great. But there's just all of these dynamics of, and that's before even the transition of just, hey, is this going to impact bonus or raise or whatever? And there's just all of those fun things. I like to call things fun when they're not, because then I pretend that they are. Yeah.
So, well, Mark, how about from your perspective? You got anything to add to what was going on? Then we'll get to the sort of the.
Well, when
How you
you
guys got over
start
the hump.
something from nothing,
Yeah.
it was like peeling the skin off my arms. But in
Wow.
the same regard is that I am very glad that it happened, because now my relationship with my son and his kids are just totally different. And he kept saying to me over and over, he says, I just want you to be Papa. I don't want to be I don't want to work for you anymore. I don't want you to be my boss. I just want you to be the grandfather to my kids like you were when I was growing up. And now I'm realizing that more and more. I'd be a liar to say that there weren't some times of bitterness and competition, which I regret. But in the same regard is that I like the place I am right now. I get bored. I mean, retirement is not for me, all right? Just sitting and looking at the water all day long and playing golf, I mean, it gets old. And so I've gotten involved with another company that I'm enjoying myself in, and he's done such a great job with the culture and the profitability. And I was a softie. I was. He's very, very diligent in doing the right thing and keeping his emotions out of it. And I would a lot of times lead with my heart instead of my head. And in business, you do not do that. You lead with your head, not your heart, because you lose about 90% of the time when you're leading here instead of here. And so what he's done and the culture that he's brought to this company is unbelievable. And he runs it like a camp. I'm telling you, these people are all so happy and having a great time. And but they respect him and have a lot of respect for Christian Brothers, and I have a lot of respect for him as well.
That's awesome. So you finally got over the hump during COVID, I guess. That's the kind of the accelerator on things. You think?
Yeah, and we just celebrated our 40th year anniversary at the annual convention last August. When was it? August we went. And if that convention, and there was kind of a retirement thing for me, if that would have happened pre-COVID, I probably would have been bitter. But God worked on me through COVID, and through COVID, I wasn't involved in the business because, you know, nobody's coming to the office, and I don't even know what Zoom is. So anyway, I'd removed myself, or God had pretty much removed me from the business to start taking the emotion out of it, because it was like one of my children growing this thing. And I guess that was the toughest part for me.
That's great. And that's,
did that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let me just ask another question, and this is to both of you, and it would be relatable across the room. You know, there's this tendency among men, this is moving past transition, but there's this tendency among men to sort of equate your identity, like who you are, with what you do, right? So when business or whatever your world might be is high, your sense of personal value is high. You know, when things drop, so does your sense of self-worth or value. So I'd love to just hear, I mean, everybody battles that, but I'd like to hear just from either of you, both of you, ways that you've faced that battle. I mean, the way you push back against it, and the way your faith in Christ might help affect something that hits all of us in our lives.
I would say that was the toughest part, is that when you leave something like that, you feel like you have no more value. And you work for years and years and years, no matter if you have your own business or retire or whatever, it's like what you hang your hat on every day and do every day for the good of people. I mean, making money, obviously, all those different things, and just pouring your life into it. And all of a sudden, now I'm over here, and my value is gone. And we probably have some retired guys in here that can really relate to that. And so I guess that was, yeah, it was tough. Yeah, it's still a little tough, but I'm getting there.
How about you, Don?
Yeah, I think for me, there's lots of great things about being a believer. One of my favorite things is knowing where my value lies. And so I oftentimes in business or in family or whatever it is, I like to play the game of the real worst case scenario. Like how bad is this really? And you know, like one of the examples, like a light example I like to give is during the freeze, all of our pool equipment broke, right? And I'm like, okay, so I'm fortunate enough to have a pool where my pool equipment broke. Like, yeah, I got it pretty bad, right? And I love to just think about, okay, I think this is bad. If you walked up to the average American that's making $25 an hour. Is this that bad to them? And then to me, really where I go at the end of that is where does my value lie? And it is in Christ. And so I know that at the end of the day, and it's easier said than done, but if I can stand before him and I can hear, well done, my good and faithful servant, and it has nothing to do with my margins or my customer service index score or any of those things or the business that I built, if I can remind myself that my value lies in Christ, then I don't have to worry about that. And so that's why I love playing what's the real worst case scenario here, because if the real worst case scenario is I have none of these things, none of these earthly things, but God looks at me and says, well done, my good and faithful servant, then I'm great. Because that, at the end of the day, my value lies in Christ. And the way that he perceives me and sees me is all I need. And so that's what helps me. I haven't retired. I haven't had to experience that. It's easy to sit up here and say that as this role with a successful business, but that's my thoughts.
That's excellent, Mark.
I'd like to add, too, is that when we just did this annual convention, I'm standing in the back of the room, and I'm seeing this sea of people. Was there 500-600 people there in all these stores? And this guy was watching me, and I was kind of looking over the crowd and just kind of taking it in. And then he came from across the room, and he says, the Lord just put it on my heart to tell you, well done, my good and faithful servant. And that was the day that I was able to lock the door and say, okay.
Done. Awesome. That's outstanding. Cool. Well, we're almost out of time, but I did want to give an opportunity. If anybody got a question or two from the crowd for these guys, then we'll hear that. Hang on a second. Yeah.
How did you pick your mentors? You started with one business, then you've got 6, then you've got 40, now you've got 250.
How did you pick mentors?
How did your mentors play into this growth pattern that started 30 years ago?
You mean the franchisees or the people that surrounded me?
Mentors and trained you,
Oh.
gave you insight.
Yeah. There was, God brought me some pretty amazing people. There's one guy, I call him Uncle Dave. That was quite a story. But anyway, I'll go through it real quick, is that we were out of money. Venture capitalists coming down my throat, just about to lose the business. Go on a road show, trying to raise business, got a goose egg, and I don't know what to do. I'm on the phone with a guy that I hadn't talked to in 15 years. He says, say, why don't you call my Uncle Dave? Maybe he'll give you the money. And I'm going, Uncle Dave, and what do I know with him? But in a long story short, is that he came into my life and just shook my hand, and it's such a long story, but he was one of the most influential people in my life. He just shook my hand and he says, I'm in for $1 million. And I didn't even know the guy. I met him for 40 minutes. He came to my office. He brought in a boating magazine, and all he talked about was his boat. Never asked us one question about the business. Walked out by the reception desk, shook my hand, and says, I know integrity when I see it. I'm in for $1 million. About 6 months later, the venture capitalist got me right here again. I knew I couldn't go back to Uncle Dave, so I ran into a guy named Dr. John Freeman, and I'm coming back from Atlanta, and it's a disaster. I'm praying that the plane goes down. And then, so I had met this guy, Dr. John Freeman, and I called him up, and I says, would you have dinner with me? So I told him about it and what I would do. And but I only had like 15 days to get this done, and you can't even paper something up when you got a stock transaction. I sat there and gave him the whole spiel, and he looked me right in the eye, and it was like a minute pause, and I'm going, oh, boy. And that seemed like a day. And he shook my hand, and he says, I know integrity when I see it. I'm in for $1 million. The same exact words as Uncle Dave said. And those two guys were really huge mentors to me. But they cared about me more so than they cared about the business. Yes, they were profitable, smart guys. But they cared about me and taught me. And I don't know everything, and not anybody does, but I try to surround. I look at myself, I'm very honest with myself, and I surround myself with people that are good in areas that I'm not. So
Good.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, great. Way in the back there.
The chaplaincy, I'm really curious, when did you get involved, why did you get involved,
Yeah, so it'll cost us over $400,000 this year, maybe closer to $500,000. So we got involved with it back in 2019. It has been absolutely amazing. It's a business called Marketplace Chaplains, and what they do, so they both serve us and they serve our team members and our guests, and so things happen all the time. We've had, this last year we had a team member that passed away in the bathroom at one of our locations. And the ability to dispatch our chaplains to that situation, to go speak at a funeral, to go sit at a bedside, to do all of these things. We do it both the home office and we offer it to all of our locations. And the other great thing that they'll do is they'll give us reports at a very high level of what our team members are struggling with, whether it's marriage or finances or parenting, just whatever that is. And so then we can put out programs to help support those types of things. And so we've been a big fan of them.
That's outstanding. All right, last one right here, Jack. Brief.
So, can you share a bad customer service experience where you didn't forget it and it didn't turn out the way you expected?
Can you share a bad customer service experience?
Yeah, I read an email shortly before I left this morning about a bad customer experience. So here's my favorite one. So in 2008, I was the franchise operator, the GM of our North Katy location because a franchisee backed out last minute. I'm also still doing my duties at the home office as customer care. I get an email about a customer complaint for the location that I'm running. And so I have to call that customer as the corporate representative about the store that I'm responsible for. And so that was a very entertaining dynamic, and definitely could have done some things better.
I'm sure there's plenty of those. All right, we are out of time, so we're going to have to kind of bring it in for landing there. But how about a big Toolbox thank you, Donnie and Mark Carr. Thank you, guys. This is so good.